my great pleasure to introduce everyone to Mike Crumpton. He is the current president of the NCLA Library Association and a really nice guy. He's also the assistant dean for administrative services and associate professor at the university libraries at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, which is a pretty amazing school. So I didn't want to give a big long introduction because Mike's going to talk a little bit about the stuff that he's worked on in the past. And so we'll just take it away to you, Mike.
Well, thank you, Kelly. Thank you for putting this together, and thank the sections. I think this is a great example of future enterprises, which we're going to talk about the future a little bit. But the college university section, the paraprofessional association, the community and junior college section, the distant learning section, and thanks to App State for University Center for Academic Excellence. I think this is just a wonderful example, excuse me, of us getting together to share our experiences and our predictions of the future and what things are going to impact us in the profession. So I just think this is a great event, and I'm pleased to be part of it. Let's see if I can advance. There we go. Okay. So just to give you a little bit about myself so that you know where I'm coming from. As Kelly said, my day job is at UNC Greensboro. I'm the current president of NCLA, and I have really enjoyed that quite a bit. You'll see in the middle of the screen there the logo from the last conference, and that was one of the best conferences I've ever attended, not just because I helped put it together, but because of all the content and contributions that librarians across the state. So anyway, we were talking about conference, and so there's the logo from the last conference that I think a lot of you were there, and that was great. The next conference is this October 15th through 18th at Winston-Salem again in the Benton Center. And Lori Russell is working on that one with a great team. And we're making a lot of changes. We're doing some innovative things. And so I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you attend and enjoy it. The other thing about me is I try to give back where I can. And so I'm a former retail manager. So I have that business perspective in my background, and under my repository, there are articles and things like that I've written in terms of management concepts that I kind of was transitioning from retail to library land. So you're welcome to look at any of those things. And if there's ever anything I can do to help you, I'd be more than happy to. I have maintained a human resources certification for many years since I was a retailer. And so I use that to help balance myself mentally sometimes in terms of how external factors impact libraries, and in this case, professional associations as well. So I think it's important sometimes that you have something on the outside that helps you mentally balance those things. But that's why that's there. And these, the publications, many of you know Dr. Bird. She's been my great collaborative partner on a lot of things. But I started off at the Public Library of Cincinnati in Hamilton County, and actually at ALA, some of you might have seen The Public is a documentary type of film coming out. It's about homelessness. It was filmed at the main library in downtown Cincinnati, which is where I worked, and so I recognized all the buildings and stuff. It's coming out in April, and I definitely recommend viewing it if you get a chance, because it was well done. Emilio Escobar was there answering questions after the viewing, so that was pretty exciting. But then I had the great fortune of going to Wake Tech as the library director there, and you wear many hats in the community college, which those of you in the community college know. I would never trade that experience for anything in the world, because you really learn so much, and I got a great network of folks who I consider my friends and colleagues now, and I try to attend all their conferences going forward. But Dr. Bird and I put together a few years ago a handbook of community college librarians, because that didn't exist. So we've got that out there. Our latest publication is down at the bottom, and it's about short-term staff, long-term benefits, meaning pulling in the opportunities from having part-time staff, whether it's students, temp people, internships, residencies, whatever, and how to make the most of them. And then in the middle, I wrote an HR book. So enough about me, but I just wanted to kind of give you a little background from where I was coming from. So next slide, I want to start talking about North Carolina and what I've kind of gleaned from reading through some of the state reports and economic impact papers and things like that, where North Carolina is headed. And to me, what's important here is it's hard to predict the future, okay? So it's hard for me or anyone else, I think, to sit here and say the future of North Carolina or the future of libraries is going to be something specific. But what you can do is you can plan for it, okay? You can look at indicators and trends and plan for what that future could be. So just to click through a couple of slides related to what people in North Carolina are predicting is an increased population. Now, I think that might be, a lot of us might think, well, that's obvious because the population's been growing. Well, it's indicated to continue to grow. Part of that's climate, and part of that is just simple population growth as a natural occurrence. But so North Carolina is expected to grow and probably pick up more congressional seats over the next few years, and that's an important factor there. Urban areas are growing in particular. And if you live in Charlotte or Raleigh, and even Greensboro or Winston-Salem or Wilmington and Asheville, you kind of have seen examples of that growth as boundaries have extended outside the regular city limits. Things like in Winston-Salem, they're redoing the Business 40 through downtown, which you'll hear more about as we get closer to the conference. So that's an infrastructure improvement. So just all kind of things are happening within these urban areas. It doesn't mean the rural areas get ignored. And so part of my point there is, as we focus on urban areas growing, we have kind of a dual responsibility to pay attention to what's happening there and what kind of needs those folks have for libraries, but also the rural libraries are important too for the economic development going forward. So the economics, technology, farming, those are all things that are expected to grow in North Carolina over the next several years. Economics, we're a strong economy right now, and so that's important. The technology is also ramping up. And so from a library point of view, it's important to kind of keep up with what's happening around us because that's our constituents. That's our patrons, our students, our folks that are interacting with new technologies are then bringing that to us in terms of consideration or questions or help or things like that. And farming is going to continue to be strong. So that's another reason to make sure that we're paying attention to those rural markets because they are increasingly using technology and other means for enhancing the farming experience. Retirement and tourism is also going to grow. And I'll say this, I grew up in Florida, and started working professionally in Florida. And Florida is also always known as the retirement tourism place. But even back a few years when I was still in Florida, North Carolina was considered an up-and-coming competitor. So I think we're going to see more and more of that, which means that's a different constituent to pay attention to in terms of the needs for the folks who are retiring or just visiting. Consumer markets are also changing, and I think we see that in a lot of different ways. Being what I was saying is a former retail person, retail itself has changed tremendously. The products that are being sold change tremendously. The way it's being delivered changes tremendously. I'm sure most of you have an Amazon account. My wife does. And so why is that important to us? Because the consumer market, I think, feeds into libraries, whether it's public or academic, a certain level of expectation from the patron, from the student or the constituent. And so I think it's important to keep an eye on what's happening with consumer markets. And then finally, education and healthcare. Now, those of you in academic environments know that The higher education demands are changing, the expectations are changing, and so we're seeing a lot of expectations pushed back into the libraries in terms of keeping up with the home institution. Healthcare in particular, health science programs in universities and community colleges are growing significantly. And I know here at UNCG, we built the Union Square facility in downtown Greensboro, which is a collaboration between us and A&T and Guilford and Greensboro College and Guilford Tech. We're building a new nursing building. And I think if I remember from that bond a few years ago, that quite a few of the new buildings at the UNCs are nursing related. And the community colleges are also coming forward with their strong vocational programs related to healthcare and health sciences. So it's important that we keep an eye on that and keep up with what's going on with that. I mentioned vocation. So that's an example of where we want to make sure that it's not a one-size-fits-all situation for information literacy. This is an article that Dr. Bird and I put out a few years ago related to workplace information literacy, where we were examining what was happening within the community colleges that were focusing mostly on transfer students, but not focusing on the vocational students. I think that's changed a lot just talking to my friends and colleagues, but this is just an example of paying attention to a broader spectrum of information literacy needs. There's also conversation now about transliteracy. We actually presented at the last community college conference about this transliteracy, and it's kind of other people are picking up on it too. Dr. Bird's actually going to Nottingham, England, I think in April, to talk about it. And transliteracy is, the way we're defining it, is about this whole changeover between different grade levels or different going from community colleges into universities, into graduate programs, into PhDs, in helping people transition their information literacy ideals and standards into different or the next level of education. And then finally, within North Carolina, we have to look at the trends of diversity. And diversity has many components. It's not just black and white. It's about many different things. And I think you guys have probably all had a lot of different diversity training. And so just think it through in terms of your organization serving diverse needs. It is ethnic backgrounds. It's sexual orientation. It's age. And it's culture. So it's a lot of different things that the prediction is that North Carolina will become more and more diverse, which I don't think is a surprise to anybody. But that's something to keep in mind. And then the other piece here is life cycle librarians. So as we go through these other changes, it broadens that foundation of who our constituents are. And so it's important to recognize that we have needs for both newborns and their parents, all the way up to seniors and healthcare and those kind of related things, and all the people in the middle, the young adults and teens, the K-12, the community college folks, the undergrad, the grad, PhDs. So wide range of expectation there in terms of information needs. So what are we going to do about that? Well, the first thing is to talk about change and what change really, really means. Because people are afraid of change. And what I'm just trying to say here is that we're going to need to change, okay? Looking ahead, looking at these trends, it's going to be important that we learn how to change and learn how to change efficiently. So to look at change in the future, I wanted to see what about change in the past. And there is a report that was put together in 1971. I've got the title of it and the references. But it was a commission by the state with the state librarian and a variety of educational officials as part of that talked about in 1971 a large knowledge explosion. And they're saying a large knowledge explosion is a recognized phenomenon. Its impact on every phase of American life is obvious, and the role of the library becomes significant. Okay, so we're in 2019, and so looking back at 1971, they're saying the same kind of things about change. They're looking at these trends and they're saying, okay, this information explosion is causing all these changes. And what came out of that report was the concept of instead of having individual libraries scattered around, having shared library systems. And I think that was the foundation for a lot of the systems that we currently have in place. And that includes public and academic and community college, because the professional associations picked up on that and was part of the unifying force in those things. So their recommendation here is that libraries have to function together as a system. And I'll come back to why I pointed that out in a few minutes. So what does change mean? Because a lot of times people just kind of get freaked out with the word change and what does that really mean? And so it's moving into something different or transforming or converting, and that can be transforming or converting services, what people do, what the end product is to your constituent. It can mean a lot of different things. In a retail environment, it might mean new products, new way of displaying things, or new ways of delivering it, like I mentioned before. So it's a transformation or an alteration of an existing concept, service, or product. So this little slide is kind of all the reasons you don't want to change. And this is what you're going to hear sometimes when you're starting to implement something new is, you know, what's in it for me, or it won't be funded, or that's not my job, or sometimes I just don't want to. So just, you want to be aware that there's going to be resistance to change. But back to the trends, I feel that change is necessary and should be ongoing. So one advocate for change is David Lankus, and some of you might know him from, he's the Dean of the Library School at the University of South Carolina. He's written several books. This is from his book, The Atlas of New Librarianship. So if any of you have looked at that, I think it's a really great book. It's hard to read sometimes, but if you haven't looked at it, I invite you to. One of his central points is about change. And what he's trying to do is put in perspective that the mission of librarians is to improve society. And they do that through facilitating knowledge creation in their communities. And see, this applies, once again, to all library types. But it's not just about a customer service model of checking out a book or answering a simple question. It's about helping people create knowledge. And that's that entrepreneurial, innovative type of mindset. And he also talks a lot about communities. And so communities are defined by where you are and who you are. If you're a public library, your community is obviously the people that live around you. If you're an academic library, your community is your academic institution, but also the people that live around that academic institution. So he's asking at this point, and this has been out a few years, but he's asking at this point to make that change mentally, of not just going through the motions, but helping, engaging people to facilitate knowledge. So some of the radical conversations that's part of that is that programming should kind of promote and help people learn. So when you're doing programming, is learning objectives considered as an example? Libraries can help create, and they're not just meant to be manual labor for testing or create some kind of supreme authority over deciding about information content. It's to help people learn if that's the right thing for them. It's demonstrating conversations with community and helping the community understand the value that's gained by employing the library in their repertoire, so to say. The focus should be on knowledge and not just on information, but what do you do with that information? And then telling stories is a big part of this. I'll talk about the Leadership Institute in a little bit, but just so you know, the storytelling has been incorporated into the Leadership Institute curriculum and has been very successful. He also came out with this book after the first one called Expect More. And I'm just putting this out here as a recommendation to you guys. In reality, what he's saying overall is that we should be growing ourselves to expect more of ourselves so that we can provide more to our patron base. And he's got some good suggestions in there. So we didn't have time to go through a whole lot of that, but I'm just putting that out there as a recommendation to look at this particular book if you haven't already. Someone else who talks about the future of libraries sometimes is Seth Godin. If you're familiar with him, he's a marketing kind of person. He's written a lot of books on marketing. On his blog, he had made a comment about the future of the library, once again, a couple of years ago, that generated a lot of conversation about what he was saying. But his proposal for economic shortfalls is that you train people to take an intellectual initiative, as opposed to, once again, just kind of going through the motions of giving them what they've asked for. But you take that next step of engagement to actually get them thinking about what they're doing or needing, and in looking for ways to find the information that's already out there. So we like to talk about creating new knowledge, but there's a ton of information already out there. And so it's a matter of getting people to take that intellectual initiative. Probably the best example to think of is when someone's walked up to the reference desk and they've Googled something. And so they're kind of quoting to you the whole Google mindset of this is what I found. And then so from our profession, we can take that up to the next level and challenge them as to, excuse me, whether or not that was the best answer and how to find maybe a better answer. Is how I was kind of looking at that. So in talking about change, and change doesn't have to be all that scary if it's approached correctly. So in this case, I like these pivot points because a lot of things have already changed like this if you think about certain settings. So you can keep the machines in your factory, but you change what they make. So manufacturers have been doing that for years. And so their people kind of expect that to happen, that when the product is no longer selling or desired by the public, then they're going to change what they make in order to stay in business. You want to keep your customers, but change what you're selling them. And once again, from a retail perspective, that happens consistently. Okay, things come and go. Sometimes it's a fad. Once it's gone, that valuable shelf space is waiting for the next thing. And so once again, that's how you're keeping the business viable. Keep your staff, but change what they do. And this is something that up front, if you've incorporated a culture of flexibility within your staff, then they expect that there's going to be change coming along. You know, that they'll have their jobs, but they'll be doing something different potentially. Keep your mission, but change your scale. You know, I think overall our missions will stay the same. Our enduring values will stay pretty much the same, but it's the scale of what we do that might change, and that balance between different things could change. And then keep your technology, but use it to do something different or enhance it to do something different. So once again, you see that all started with keep. So change doesn't have to be about changing everything, but it has to be about having that culture and mental flexibility to make these changes as needed. So another part of, and I'm just going to run through this quickly, another part of planning the future is to plan it strategically. And that's why I put this in here. I know a lot of you probably have already had some strategic planning sessions, guidelines, or whatever. But what's important is that it's an ongoing process. And you should be planning for the future right now. And if the future's in 5 years and you're planning for something for 5 years, then as soon as that's done, you should start planning for the next 5 years. It's just that important to keep libraries relevant and needed by the public. Assessment and evaluation should be an ongoing activity. Assessments, the process of evaluating work or activity. It's that simple. But assessing it with open eyes. Are you doing the right thing? Are you doing something that nobody cares about anymore and that could be let go to do something else? When I was at the Public Library of Cincinnati in Hamilton County, I was as the services manager. And so I was fairly new, and I'm standing out at the service desk helping, and a staff member next to me was helping, she was there too. And the lady walks up and asks for change for the bus. And the staff member said, "Oh, we don't do that." And so the lady walked away. So I walked over and I said, why did you say that? Why can't we give her change? "Oh, well, Mrs. So-and-so won't let us do that." And I said, "Well, who is that?" "Oh, well, she's been retired for 10 years, but she told us not to give change." And it's like, that was kind of crazy. We started giving change that day. But, that's what I'm saying, looking at assessing what's happening so that you can make those kind of changes. And of course, evaluation is that judgment call, and having some kind of quantitative measure to that. The strategic planning process is creating a strategy to move forward, basically, and tying it to your mission. And it's just important, I think, to reevaluate periodically what you're doing and is it the right thing to do, and to be strategic about it. And the goal of strategic planning is to provide that flexibility and energy that allows future goals to be first considered and then moved forward on if needed. This is a little bit on strategic formation and development. And it basically, I'm just going to jump over here to the SWOT analysis. That's an old concept, but it's still very valid because it's just, if you think of it this way, a SWOT analysis is framework. So you should always be considering what your strengths and weaknesses are and look for ways to play on your strengths and improve your weaknesses. But those opportunities and threats, those are things that we don't always pay attention to, and we should. Opportunities, meaning what's happening out there that we can capitalize on. That might be partnering with somebody else within your institution or your community. And then what are the threats? The threats could be as simple as a bookstore opening down the street, or a professor that creates an information literacy group or something like that. Those are the kind of things that that awareness and assessing what you're doing within your current environment will give you an edge up on planning for the future. But I wanted to get into innovation and entrepreneurship. And some of you might have been, we have UNCG libraries and Wake Forest libraries have been conducting an entrepreneurial conference for the last 10 years. We did, the last one was last October. And we invite in people from all over to come in and share their entrepreneurial stories with us. And it's a small conference. It's usually about 100 on average. And it's kind of exciting to hear what other people are doing. And I've also seen examples where participants in the conference have gone back to their home institutions and made changes based on that. So I just think having an innovative and entrepreneurial mindset going forward is really going to help anyone prepare for the future. So an example of that is there's a concept going on now called Library 4.0. And in the references, there's an article from Young-hee No from South Korea talking about imagining Library 4.0 and creating a model for libraries. And if you're not familiar with that concept, and the reason I'm putting this in here is because I really do think that's part of the future is these kind of concepts are going to take hold and move forward and grow. But Library 4.0 is really about reading, writing, and executing simultaneously intelligent-based agents, connected web, intelligent connections, and intelligent-based web conversations. So this can be things like augmented reality and things like that. It builds upon your makerspaces, your open source, your big data, your cloud services, and your state-of-the-art displays. So this is, and I'm sorry I don't know more about it, but this is something to keep an eye on for the future, this type of activity. That's why I wanted to put it in here. And in that article, it's a technical read, but I think you might enjoy it to take a look at that particular article. The other thing that I'm going to kind of recommend is that we all should be looking at what's happening within society and government because that helps drive what we do as libraries. So this is a good example, this report of tracking innovation. It's put out by the Chamber of Commerce for North Carolina, and the recommendation here is from this governor's University Innovation Council, is that North Carolina has the intellectual and innovative capacity to compete with any state or union. So they're saying North Carolina is competitive. That's good. But what's needed is this optimal mix of processes, resources, and people to convert that capacity into new products and services. So in other words, they're recognizing, back to what I was saying about change, they're recognizing that in order to be competitive with the other states or nationally, North Carolina's got to make these changes for products and services that will increase economic activity and jobs. So it's basically saying that North Carolina's innovation commercialization can be improved. And so the other point here is, if you look at that publication, there's not any librarians involved. And so that's a missing opportunity. Back to the SWOT analysis, I would think that's an opportunity for us to get involved. And I found this looking for this presentation, so I made a commitment to myself to dig deeper and see if that's possible for us to get involved at some level. And then this was just their recommendation of the steps that are involved in this ecosystem that they're talking about. And once again, there's not really a librarian or an information presence in here. So I think that's the kind of opportunities I'm talking about. And if you look at step 6, where they're talking about they tell the university innovation story, to me that goes back to the home institutions. So here at UNCG, for example, we have a department of commercial activity, which is usually related to the grant activity that the academic departments are doing. Sometimes, we all try to get involved in these grants, and sometimes we're successful and sometimes we're not. But here's a broader point of view as to why it would be important to do so. And then to talk a little bit more about entrepreneurship, what is it? And once again, I don't think it's as scary a word as it sounds like sometimes. It's just learning to be creative and innovative and thinking outside the box with situations. But it's also learning to put your efforts where you can create value into what you're doing and then share that value with others. Are there teachable skills? I think so. I'll show you in a minute. But it's also looking for ways for other opportunities. And it also is a non-traditional means of employment, meaning, and we have librarians graduating from our program that end up outside of libraries because they've kind of taken an entrepreneurial approach to their career. So some of the trends impacting the LAS education, and Nora and I have been looking at this, and I didn't mention this before, but I'm an affiliate faculty member with our LIS department. And once again, that's a wonderful experience. Got a great group of faculty members here. We also, though, collaborate with the other library schools, which I have found very refreshing. and we compare notes and that kind of stuff. With NCLA, we started a student track at the last conference that was well attended. But it was a flipped concept. We asked the students, what do you need that you're not getting in library school? And then we found presenters to present to them. And we're repeating that in the conference coming up. So some of these trends, which can have an entrepreneurial attachment to it, is how technology is driving things, the use of data, different types of learning styles and activities, different demographics coming in, how policies might have to be changed in order to be more entrepreneurial, and then different kind of resources coming at you. So if you look at future competencies, and I'm saying this from a hiring perspective, these are the kind of competencies that hiring employers are looking for these days. Project management skills, we're including that now in the Leadership Institute curriculum. Learning how to facilitate learning, not just lecturing. I went to a Lilly conference last year. That Lilly conference is about educators. And the attack at the conference was on the lecture. And so just lecturing these days was a bad word for the educators. And the bottom line at the conference and the conclusion was that what's really needed is people trained in active lecturing. So that's, I thought that was interesting. So I'm curious to see where that goes. Technology, of course, is varied now. It's broader, very diverse. And so having the competency to manage multiple types of technology is important. Marketing and advocacy skills, communication skills, those are all important in our profession now, and hasn't been traditionally a focus in LIS education. Diverse populations, problem solving, social services training, all of that is hitting us new within the profession. Fundraising is a biggie. And so I've started incorporating in my classes a whole segment on fundraising. And in my institutional repository is an article that was published that I wrote on developing a development culture within your organization. So it's giving you the basics of what staff need to know to help them in supporting that development activity. And of course, building relationships and then learning how to create value out of your assessments. So those are all kind of things that employers are looking for these days. And on this particular slide, what I'm talking about here is the kind of management skills and where it goes from that. So that whole planning activity, it's not just about planning steps, but also development of those steps and the strings from each step and where it goes from there in terms of implementation and stuff like that. Organizing back to that environmental examination of what's going on is important. Problem solving, emotional stability, I think, is important there. We teach at the Leadership Institute about emotional intelligence skills. And so some of those kind of things are in play there. I put this slide in there. It's an upcoming conference. It's actually next year. But I liked the idea because if you read a little bit more about it, it's really, this conference is a good example of doing something new and different, kind of like this virtual conference is, but learning how to design and practice education in a new world. And then you see the side there, it says understanding skills in a complex world. So as the world gets more and more complex, it's important to recognize that so that we can start talking about it among ourselves and collaborate on better ways to do it. I want to share this. This is a poster that, once again, my good colleague, Dr. Bird, and I put together for an ALISE conference, which is, ALISE is the Association of Library and Information Science Educators. This poster, we've got a chapter coming out later this year about this, but the librarianship side is the enduring values that we should all be familiar with. And then the entrepreneurial side is those entrepreneurial type skills that need to be incorporated in LIS education in order to help future librarians meet future demands. And so it's kind of based on some design thinking, and it's updating the traditional model of what's done in the curriculum within LIS. And then if you look at the employable outcomes, which is one of your goals, is to get people employed. It's not just about business librarians, but it's also information specialists. There's still special libraries out there, being able to support the community better and being able to influence vendors. And vendors could be a whole nother session, because it's important, I think, that we recognize what the vendors are doing, that we work with. So the other thing to bring into this in terms of planning for the future is network leadership. And so what's your network? Well, it's a group of people or organizations that's connected and work with each other. Okay, so that's kind of obvious. But it's purposeful, okay? And I think that's what's important here. Network leadership is having the appropriate people in constructive ways work with good information for authentic visions and shared concerns. So that's that purposeful part of it. So you can have a group get together to work on a problem or have a social interaction or something like that. But this network leadership is to have a purposeful group that's the right people using information in a constructive way, and then trying to share concerns or problem solve issues in the community. And it might mean, but it does mean working across boundaries, traditional boundaries. So I think we're seeing more and more examples of that. And so I invite you to look at opportunities there to cross boundaries, to work with different types of organizations or people to make a difference. It's back to what I was saying about my HR certification. I attend HR conferences, and including the local ones, NC SHRM, and I find them valuable because it's crossing, I haven't found any other librarians there, but I have found other people that have similar concerns in different types of professional activities. And that, I think, that helps stimulate that innovative process along the way. Why use strategies? Obviously, it's going to help strengthen, I think, the relationships between those organizations. It gives you more access to diverse populations that you might not find within your own organization. Helps you build and share knowledge, which is the goal. It can mobilize more people to get more people involved to help solve a particular problem. And you're more effective together, especially in a community type of situation, because it's just the economies of scale of doing something that affects everybody more efficiently than individually. And then change here is important because it's not all eggs in one basket. So you've got a lot of different things going on there that impacts how things could change. This is into the leadership part of it. It's important that we recognize who's coming behind us. And I can say that as probably one of the older folks on the conference here. It's important that you're planning for the folks behind you. And that's why I've got a lot of focus on the students and what we're doing with the LIS students. I think that's just important. But as we move into leadership in the future, they have the same things that we want. They want to be respected and valued, and they're looking for paths to success. In this climate, the future can be uncertain. So it's important that we give them the confidence and strength to move forward. We want to be successful with our work and our families. So we want to have that life balance. And we can't always predict the future. So leadership helps give us that confidence. These are some shots from the Leadership Institute. And leaders don't create followers, but they do create other leaders. And that's what I'm saying, is we want to be able to give back and give to the next generation of folks behind us. And that's part of planning for the future, in my opinion. This is I think it's the class of 2016. We were at Black Mountain, and some of you might be in that picture. I can't tell at this point. And this was the class of 2012, I think. So some of you might be in this picture. And that was at Caraway. But the North Carolina Library Association Leadership Institute, which happens every other year from the conference, I think has made a big difference in a lot of people and organizations in our state. And I appreciate that. The last thing to kind of run through is advocacy. And advocacy is, once again, it could be its own section. It's real important. There's been some tremendous efforts from our point of view for advocacy. This shot is showing a couple of trips to Washington, D.C. The yellow T-shirts, that's the Student Ambassador Program that Dr. Chow kind of runs. And I think that makes a significant difference in our voice from North Carolina to Washington. I think it was last year's trip, we had the most number of delegates that went. And the funding came from a variety of sources. And it was a great collaborative trip, and it was successful because we, excuse me, we did change some votes in the voting for IMLS and things like that. So I think that was advocacy is a strong and useful part of someone's skill set. And so here's a good example of a Wordle, just using those kind of words to put in there. And like I said, NCLA goes to the annual trip to Washington and to represent North Carolina. There's also the state effort that's led by the NCPLDA group, the Public Library Directors Group. The school media folks are also strong in both of those groups, supporting and voicing telling their stories, so to say, to the legislature. And then, of course, there's local advocacy with your own city councils and county management. So what is advocacy? It's really getting out there and just talking about the things that impact you, both personally and as an organization. And so it's important, I think, that you have that mindset that you need to talk about it. And so this is another skill set that's rising in the LIS curriculum to teach future librarians that you need to be part of these voices that are going out there and talking to people who impact the institution. That's the important thing. And it's helping transition from just being informed to being engaged. Excuse me. I think that, and that's part of the point, is that we've been a profession that is pretty informed. We're pretty smart and we can answer a lot of questions and things like that. But the future of librarianship is going to be more engaged in your communities, with your patron base, and with your civic and government officials. So transitioning over to professional associations, it's important, I think, that we recognize the value of the professional association. And that's why I think this collaborative effort between the sections for NCLA is so wonderful. This is really what you want to get out of being a member of either NCLA or ALA or MLA or SLA, all of these different associations. Help individuals be successful, help gain knowledge and develop new skills, collaboratively, talk together about what the future is going to be, of what work and things like that are headed towards, adapting to changes that are coming, and just helping each other overall move forward with the changes that's going to occur, some naturally and some by design. So I suggest investing in yourself. Um, a lot of folks kind of fall back on the institution's got to support me doing this and blah, blah, blah. But there is a certain amount of personal investment that's important in being part of a professional association. And historically, that value, the value of a professional association was just making sure the organization continued on. And then that individual value was related to the time and effort that individual put into it. So, but the new generation, you know, they're looking at building their competencies and skills. They're looking at getting jobs and what it takes to get a job. And then that whole social inclusion of diversity and promoting cultural significance is important. So once again, things have changed in terms of what professional associations are all about. We are actually making some changes this year with NCLA. We're losing Kim, the executive assistant, and no, we're not going to replace her as she is. We're actually going to. We voted last executive board meeting to adopt Wild Apricot as a membership software and web system. So we're transitioning to that into the spring and summer. And then at the conference in October, we'll be training folks on how to use it because we want it to be more interactive and more inclusive. So this little story I just want to share. And to me, this is an example back to pivoting changes. It's a story about Apple that was it's a recent story, and there's the link to it down there. They're starting to do training classes, and so that sounds like something that maybe we should be doing is Apple training classes, but they've jumped ahead and they're doing it in their stores. So they're famous for their Genius Bar, and now I think they might want to be famous for their instruction. So take a look at that when you get a chance. The other thing I wanted to share in terms of space, because if you notice, I'm the editor of the Journal of Learning Spaces. It's an open access journal. I invite you to take a look at that as well. It's not just library focused. It's learning spaces wherever they may be, the library, the classroom, external. So I would invite you to be a contributor if you're interested. We're doing a master space plan here at UNCG. So I just wanted to share real quickly what's driving our need for innovation in space, because I would say that they kind of apply to a lot of you out there. The first one is about maintenance and stuff. We've all got maintenance issues with aging infrastructures, okay? But the ones I wanted to point out was that increased study space. That's significant because as populations grow, they got to have a place to go. And then the one on the upper right, the student success, that's partnering with all of these different pieces on campus so that we're a partner in overall student success, and that's really important. New staff workspaces, because staff are working differently, okay, and it might be different hours or different needs for technology or health related type of activities, but that's something you want to keep in mind, is keep your staff happy with their spaces. Protecting valuable resources. Your archives is your unique signature for your institution, and the things that you collect along with the archives. So it's important that they have the proper space to be housed. Technology support and training speaks for itself in terms of how things change and new devices and new programs and stuff like that. Being innovative and providing teaching and learning opportunities for students, supporting the university and overall community events. One of the things in this piece is having more convening spaces in the library. And that was a change for us because, excuse me, I'm getting a glass of water, almost done. That was a change for us because there is no major convening spaces in the library, so that's a cultural change. And then digital scholarship is important as well. So overall, we're all in this together, okay? That's why I use this slide. We're all in this together, and it's important that we have those conversations and share what our feelings about the future is all about. I wanted to throw this in there because some of the material was pulled from this. This is a poster that Dr. Lindster and I did last year, but this Nexus Lab, Layers of Leadership across libraries, archives, and museums, they pulled together this whole program that's really significant in terms of how future learning. But I want to hit the summary. So to me, what planning for the future is all about is learning to change and adapt as needed, and that's going back to your strategic planning of seeing what's out there, doing those environmental scans and the SWOT analysis, demonstrating how to be innovative and entrepreneurial in your services and what you're offering your stakeholders, learning to develop network groups and leaders and being a strong advocate for that, and using your professional associations to get there and to get there together. And so with that, there's my reference slides.